Hi, everyone. I'm Samantha Leal, managing editor here at Well+Good, and today we're talking about your mental well-being right now. I think we can all agree it's been a time. The tumultuous news cycle, social unrest, and the compounding traumas of a pandemic. It's no wonder that we're all feeling a bit depleted, sad, and anxious. A study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association in September found that the rates of symptoms associated with depression have been 3 times higher during the COVID-19 pandemic than they were before. And according to the CDC, the number of people experiencing recent symptoms of anxiety has seen a significant uptick. So, in short, we're not doing okay. As vaccines continue rolling out in the US and we take steps to a normal life, we're left dealing with a sense of loss and grief and confusion. And many of us are anxious at what awaits us on the other side. Emerging from isolation, resocializing, reconnecting with past relationships, friendships, jobs, routines, we're faced with some questions, which is really, will things go back to what was once was? And do we want them to? And what are the things we'd rather leave behind? And what are the things that we've learned that will actually help us navigate a new world? There's no better time to check in with ourselves as we look to recalibrate. So I'm so happy to have this group of amazing experts to unpack where we are now and where we're going. So with that, I'll let each panelist introduce themselves. Let's start with Minna B.
Hi, everyone. My name is Minna B, and I'm a writer, wellness coach, and a licensed therapist based in New York City. And my work is rooted in teaching people how to cultivate self care through the lens of boundaries and community care.
Amazing. Thank you for being here. Arielle, why don't we go next with you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Arielle Lastoria. I am a poet, an author, a creative, and a few drop downs of other things as well. And my focus is reminding people that they are loved and worthy and that our bodies are good.
Amazing. Thank you again for being here. And Lauren Ash, what about you?
Hello, it's such a pleasure to be here sharing space with you all. My name is Lauren Ash. I'm the founder and CEO of Black Girl in Om, which is a space that really centers Black women and women of color within wellness and spirituality. I'm an energy healer, I guide meditations, and I'm just always expanding. It's always hard to answer this question, but really, really grateful for the opportunity to talk about this important conversation.
Amazing. Well, thank you all for being here. And yes, I'm very excited to talk about this as well. For those who are attending, just so you know, there is a Q&A option. So if you want to chuck some questions into there as we roll along or chat with fellow attendees or panelists, feel free to do so. And we'll try to get some questions in at the end. So I think we can all say it's been a significant time. I think all of us, for a myriad of reasons, we're not doing our best right now. A lot of us are just kind of going through the motions, going through the acts of our lives. The New York Times gave a word to it, which is the idea of languishing, or the opposite of flourishing. And I'd love to hear kind of how you all personally have kind of felt in the last couple of months and come to terms with those feelings.
I'll start off by saying, for me personally, there's just been this sense of nostalgia, I'll say, like missing things and wanting to reconnect with doing the simple things in life, going to the movies, going on a vacation, which I haven't done yet. So I think for me, this impacts everyone uniquely. But there's been a shift in normalcy has also created this space where we all have to learn how to adapt to what is in front of us and what's happening. So I find that I personally am still shifting and forming. And as we kind of emerge back into this sense of normalcy, I'm in a place now where I am still trying to shift and figure out what are my new boundaries? What are the areas where I want to adapt and be flexible with? And getting a sense of what does reconnecting look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I feel like that's a lot of people's mindsets right now of reconnection and reintroducing themselves to a world. Lauren or Arielle, do you have thoughts as well?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to this. I think to Minna's point, right, we can only always speak from our personal experience around how the past year and change has impacted us. For me, and those of you who are here who maybe listen to the Black Girl Known podcast, you may have heard me speak to this, but I was led literally back home, which for me is Minnesota. I grew up in the Twin Cities. I'm literally speaking to you from my apartment in Minneapolis right now. I was led back home literally the same week as the first stay-at-home orders. And so for me, I planned on moving back in advance because I was intuitively and spiritually drawn back home, but I clearly couldn't have anticipated what and how my life would look like coming back home. And so for me, moving back home has symbolized quite a lot. It's included being able to be given, honestly, a very divine opportunity to deepen back into family and to address a lot of family patterns that I know that I'm literally here to interrupt. That being said, it's been challenging, right? Like for me, that's not a walk in the park. But at the same time, the timing of it could not be more on time. And so, on top of the pandemic and then being here when George Floyd was murdered, that was another, again, in a sense, divine opportunity for me to see my purpose even more clearly and the significance of me being brought back home. So, we have a phrase that we've been really using a lot within Black Girl Known over the past year, which is divine disruption. So looking at times like 2020 and even into 2021 as an opportunity for us to say, there's so much hardship, there's so much trauma that's being brought to the surface, and how is this actually an opportunity for us to expand into our greatest possibilities, to expand into the fullness of why we're all here and to deepen into purpose. So I do feel like actually I am at my best right now. And that doesn't mean that things are sunshine and roses and rainbows and butterflies, but it actually means that like my purpose has been clarified in a way that I actually give thanks for every day,
Definitely. That's lovely. And I think, I think we've seen kind of that introspective kind of look, and we've had that time to do that work, which is so lovely to hear that it's been such a great time for you, and for a lot of people, I feel like it's given them a little bit more sense of what they do want and what they don't want in their lives, which is really interesting. But Arielle, I'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, all the sentiments in duplication to what was just said. I think for me in this space that I'm currently in right now, just like making sure we speak personally is I feel like once there was like a slight lift of like things are happening again, there was like this kind of hit the ground running kind of mode that I just went back into. And so on this day, I'm just like, okay, I'm home, I'm able to be at my office and kind of slow a little bit, making sure that I don't go back into this space of like burnout, like Lauren was kind of speaking to, just like breaking generational things. My mom is like clinically diagnosed as burnt out, and that runs literally in my bloodline. And so making sure that I'm doing what I can to live a full and beautiful life, and at the same time make sure that I can do it with extension and not burn out quickly, and giving myself that permission of like saying no. I've been in this really big space of like practicing like saying it to no to myself in the mirror. I'm just like, no, we can say no, and it's not bad, it's not selfish, and learning how to do that. And I think in this last year where we didn't have a lot to say yes to, there's even more intentionality there. So really learning the weight and the beauty of my no in this space, and giving myself permission to rest. I loved this last year for that sake of like, yes, it was slow and mundane and we lost a lot, but there were still moments where we could rest, and really leaning into that and adapting it to everyday life now that we are picking back up again.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like the reverberations of the idea of rest have kind of been taking hold of a lot of people's mindsets, but also actions, because I think, rest is an action, or lack thereof, rather. So yeah, that's really lovely to hear, and something that I think a lot of people are going to be considering when we go back to these kind of routines and jobs and what we embrace of this kind of introspective period of time where we didn't have a lot to do and a lot to say yes to. So thank you for that. Minna, I'd love to hear, we've been working on, or we launched this mental well-being recharge, which really had about small, simple actions you could do to really improve your mental health during this time, because no one needs a to-do list of mental health, you know what I mean? So I'd love to hear from your perspective, what you think are some tactics or things to implement into your routines or into your kind of thought processes, to really kind of give yourself a break during this time.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that I would say is, self-care is a subjective process.
Mhm.
So it really requires us to get curious with ourselves and self-reflect on what are my needs, because what might work for my friend or what I might read on a blog post might not necessarily connect with me and what is vital for my mental well-being. So that's the first thing that I want to share, because I think this is a part of self-awareness and self-nourishment by just knowing what your needs are and how you can meet those things. The next thing I'd say is to honor your energetic boundaries. Be mindful of what you can give right now and what you can't give. I think right now that because there's been so much conversation around shifting back into normalcy, a lot of people are putting pressure on themselves or putting these expectations on what they're supposed to be doing the same way when the pandemic hit, right? We had these ideologies around what does life look like during a pandemic, and now what does life look like post a pandemic. So one of the things that I would say is honor your energetic boundaries, identify what are the things that you can give your energy to in this moment, and be okay with saying no to things, whether it be new or other practices that if it's not working for you still, or with the shift back into normalcy, people might be bringing up new ideas. It's okay for you to continue to honor the process of your boundaries as we shift. And the other thing I'd say is, with this languishing that many people are probably experiencing, it's really great for us to find different ways to reward ourselves throughout the day. And recognizing that as people who are worthy and deserving, we don't have to necessarily earn good moments in life, right? We can cultivate them. So one of the things that I encourage people to do is, if you find that your days are starting to feel mundane, chances are you're not rewarding yourself with some sort of mood boosting activities. So maybe it could look like exercising. Exercising is vague. It could be going to the gym. Maybe you have an at-home gym. It could look like going for a walk. It could look like stretching in your home, doing yoga. Other things can look like body movement in some sort of way. So I encourage people to just think through those practices. You have journaling techniques, different writing techniques that you can utilize as well. We have apps that we can utilize as well for meditation. So I encourage people to utilize those small things, because by engaging in those small habits and practices, we can start to create a shift that will lead to bigger changes for ourselves.
Definitely. I felt that one like in my soul. I was like, yes, the the small rewarding moments that you don't have to earn, I think is really pivotal, and such a different mindset than I think a lot of people had going in, at least, to the pandemic. And I think that cultivating that, those joys in your day to day, especially when your day to day is so specific, like so repetitive in many cases,
Yeah.
is really important. So thank you for that. Lauren, I'd love to hear also from like an energy working perspective or breath working perspective, or really anything, how you would also love to see people use tactics to improve, whether it's their energetic boundaries or, just bringing joy into their day to day.
Yeah, I love this. I love ritual. I'm just over here every morning, like I'm proud of myself for the amount of time that I spend on myself in the mornings, because it wasn't, that long ago where that wasn't the case, or where I was spending time on myself in ritual. But in the back of my mind, I was like, I don't deserve this, much to what Minna was speaking to, right? The way that we literally have to reprogram ourselves to tell ourselves, I'm doing this not because I work hard, but I'm doing this just because I deserve, right? Because there's a difference there. So I really want to actually kind of deepen into what Minna was speaking to around embodiment, because embodiment is literally such a beautiful pathway for healing and for us returning to who we really are, which is spiritual, sacred being. And for me, energy healing, which I recently just went through a really beautiful training with Milana Snow. I just want to shout her out because she's a very powerful guide around the work. And what I just returned to a beautiful remembrance of was that we truly are our own healers, period. Anytime that we feel called to go do a thing or take a class or go to a therapist or whatever, they're simply holding the space for us. But it's our beautiful right to reclaim, I'm the one though, making this expansive transformation happen. And so for me, I'm a really, really huge advocate for Kundalini. So I was practicing vinyasa yoga for years. I would go to hot yoga. Then I got into yin yoga. And then I got into restorative yoga. So it continued to slow down. And then I got into Kundalini, which is really the yoga of experience. It's the yoga of sensation. It's a little funky, it's a little strange, but it's actually a form of energy healing. And so no wonder why I actually was drawn to that, and then decided to more officially kind of move into integrative energy healing. But the reason why I mentioned Kundalini is that if anyone here is I'm really desiring to spend more intentional time embodied and also tapping into my spirit, Kundalini is such a powerful lineage that offers you just that. Even in the beginning of most Kundalini practices, oftentimes the teacher will offer a chant. That chant that is offered is literally a chant that's affirming that you are your own teacher. And so I just find that so powerful, because we're really shifting in a powerful and necessary way within the industry, the wellness industry and spiritual circles at large, here in the West in particular, moving from a paradigm of I need to go to you because you will heal me, and actually shifting into I'm already healed and I'm affirming my healing, I'm affirming my wholeness now, and I can choose to operate from that paradigm, right? And so, my rituals are my rituals, and much like Minna was saying, they're rooted in my intention, right? I'm not doing anything right now daily because it's just another thing to do. Every single thing I do is rooted in a very clear intention for what I'm calling into my life. And so I feel like energy healing and just reclaiming our right to self-heal is such a powerful practice that I would just, invite everyone to kind of look into. If this is lighting you up, look into it.
I love that. And I think we've seen a lot of, particularly in the wellness space, like you said, this discourse of what is a healer? Because it's such a broad term. And what does that look like? And I think to your point, it's very subjective and very in tune with whatever your needs are, which is great. Arielle, speaking of all of this and this embodiment work and this kind of ritual and moment, I remember from our self-care podcast episode, you had this really powerful moment of talking about how your plants resonated with you as part of your self-care, and how they can kind of, you express basically that just because you're not seeing growth necessarily or blooming, that it's not happening. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, and also how you yourself have kind of given ritual or anything to your self-care practices right now, or how you're taking care of yourself.
Yeah. So I think a lot of us are plant people as of this year, because it was something to do, just like
Yeah,
we
those
were
sales numbers don't.
the bread makers. And remember when we thought like making instant coffee into like a thing was like a whole, anyway, we had a lot of weird hobbies this last year because we were bored and we were trying to figure things out. And so in this last year, I like a lot of people started buying more plants. And at first it was just kind of like, this is fun, it's aesthetic. But then like the more I started to do it and be more intentional about it, the more I realized like, this is kind of like next level therapy meets self-care, meets tells you thing about yourself. And so I've been learning a lot from my plants in this last year about stillness. One being, I love randomly coming up to my plants and seeing these little sprouts, especially now in spring. I'm a very visual learner, so I'm just going to grab. So I love seeing these little sprouts just pop up. And if you look in, there's these little baby ones that are in there too. There's no leaves to it. And I don't hear this happening to my plants. I don't go and see, and it's not saying like, oh my God, look, I'm growing. Look at me, I'm growing. I just come and look, and there's a new leaf there, or there's a new bloom there. And it's very quiet, and it's very intentional. And I think in this last year, especially, it was assumed that we were just still and nothing was growing and nothing was happening. But in actuality, we were resting, we were tending to our soil, we were working on what's happening in our roots in order then to have these little blooms, in order then to have these moments of growth that we didn't need to scream from the mountaintops, but that we could acknowledge in the intimacy of our own selves. And so I think for me, I watched, nurturing my plants and them taking care of them helped me to learn how to even more so take care of myself. And I posted this on my Instagram a little while ago of like, when you touch, I know my plants are dry, not because I'm like going to the roots of it, but just because I can put my finger in and notice that the soil is dry, right? And so all that to say the same goes to us. Like, let's not wait until the roots of us are burnt out in order then to take care of ourselves. Like, just check the surface. Just ask yourself at any given day, where am I? How am I? What do I need? What does my body need? And knowing that in that moment. So yeah, I think plants have been a really beautiful reminder of what it means to take care of ourselves, what it means to acknowledge growth that doesn't yell or doesn't scream, but it's still real and tangible. And also how to be and live in the still small moments and know that we are still blooming. Yeah.
That was beautiful. Yeah, it's so funny because, the sentiment that you started in the podcast episode, and I was like, that really hit home for me, especially as someone who also partook in the buying of many a plant. But yeah, I think the stillness and the idea that we constantly have to keep going and going and going in order to prove ourselves worthy of something is kind of this reprogramming or deprogramming that we're all kind of going through at this moment. So thank you for sharing that. I think at the same time that there's been this kind of mundane, repetitive situation, there's also been this constant trauma that we've experienced, and particularly BIPOC communities, in particular Black communities, during this time. And I think that I'd love to hear why you all think that there's such an important point, and we've written about this on the site as well, an important point about the cultivation of well-being and of joy, particularly for these communities right now. It's a lot of thoughts.
I think just to piggyback off of what Lauren had said earlier of the deserving of it part of it, I think especially within this last year of just oppression after oppression, like just exhaustion after exhaustion, and just not, I got to a point where it's like, I'm not numb because I'm still feeling everything. However, I don't know what my hands feel closed and tied, like, and open all at the same time. And so this concept of like, you don't have to tap in to what's happening in the news. You don't have to re-traumatize yourself again. You are deserving of stepping back, of stepping out, of being with yourself, and that reminder too, especially with people of color, of being able to take care of ourselves. And that's not like, hustle is kind of in our culture, as Black people, I would say, of just always having to own up or be something to prove, constantly proving. Yes, we are successful enough. Yes, we are qualified enough. Yes, we are beautiful enough. This exhausting cycle of having to prove, which means rest was like not something that was even remotely taught to us, because it was a constant proving and a constant having to show yourself, when in actuality, I am enough. And I am deserving of not having to re-traumatize myself, of having to step back to live in joy. And I think that's been the biggest thing, is that joy of like, I don't always want to tell the sad story, because that's not the fullness of who I am as a Black person, as a Black woman. There is joy here. There's life here. There's abundance here. And even I had to like find that permission to like, no, if you're here because you started following me because a whole bunch of people told you to follow a Black person, and now here you are, know that you're going to get more fullness to the story of who I am as a Black woman. You're going to get my husband to a white man, and what that means in this society. You're going to get my niece because she's really cute. Look at her. You're going to get this random breakfast burrito that I'm sitting on the beach eating, because there's fullness to who I am as a Black person. And it's not just tragedy and it's not just trauma, but joy lives here too. And you have to be there for all of that and more, you know?
Yes, I love that. And I think that's such an important point, and one that has continued to come up time and time again, especially as, you know, continuous news and everything through, and people wanting to, you know, do the work or all of these things, but it's like, what does that look like if you're not actually partaking in real understanding of fullness and of joy and of well-being? So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. As we kind of navigate again the mental well-being of everyone and of different communities, and this kind of, we go back to the sense of normalcy. And I feel like we've used that word over and over, like normalcy, as if there is kind of this going back to that. But I'd love to hear kind of what anyone can chime in on this, but like, it's been such a stagnant time for a lot of people. And I'd love to hear kind of what you think is going to be something that maybe even you have experienced where we return to normalcy and there's new feelings coming up, and what those feelings may be, and or kind of how to reintroduce yourself to this new and normal life, with keeping the boundaries that, Minna, exactly what you said, of like keeping boundaries that you had set during the pandemic. So basically, are there ways that people can return to this new normal? And are there feelings that maybe even you have had, or that you think, you know, based on your own work, that you think people might experience coming into this?
I mean, I think to answer, you know, there's a lot of anxiety, right? I find that's coming up for a lot of folks, this fear of just going back to whatever it is that we're calling normal in the first place, but also integrating back into society when we've been disconnected in some sort of ways for so long, like returning back to the office, with all of these rules being, going back to what they were, lack of social distancing, all those things. And one of the things that I've been sharing with people is, we all know the term, maybe we don't, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? And so what's working for you, keep it that way. If you still want to wear a mask, remind yourself, I have permission to do X, Y, Z. I think what's been happening is we're, again, the same way shifting into the pandemic brought up all of these emotions, and a lot of us started to feel like we have to do certain things. Now that we're shifting back into normalcy, I find that when I do talk with people around what the anxiety is, there's this pressure we're putting on ourselves as if we don't have any control. And I want people to know that we are not powerless people and we are not choiceless people. We have the ability to make choices for ourselves and our well-being. Now, will our choices maybe disappoint others? Will they bring up emotions for others? Yes. But those people have the ability to work through their emotions. It's not our jobs to erect a boundary and then do the labor of helping someone process their emotions in response to our boundaries. So the first thing that I say is start pre-planning. Now that we know that the world is shifting, let's say you've been told, you've gotten the memo, you have to report back to the office in the next few weeks, or your friends are already sending you the text messages for brunch parties and going to the beach and doing all these things. Start pre-planning in advance and asking yourself, what are my non-negotiables? And what are the things that I'm flexible with doing, but also what are the things that I am open to doing? Maybe you don't want to not social distance anymore. So that might look like declining invitations, but it can also look like being flexible with the invitations that you've been getting, right? And so I feel like that's the first step, to start planning in advance. Now that things are shifting, I knew what my boundaries were while I was working from home and I was home all the time. But now that I'm going back outside into the open world, planning in advance can help us, because when we walk blindly into situations, sometimes we can freeze up. And depending on our responses to certain situations and circumstances, we might start to feel like our boundaries have been violated, especially if they weren't communicated. We might feel an array of emotions. So this is the best time, I would say, for people to start planning. And this is actually something I've been doing for myself, assessing what am I comfortable with doing now that we're going back to normal? And if it's not broken, I'm not fixing it, right? And so if this has been working for me and it's something that I can adapt and bring with me into this state of normalcy, there's no reason why I need to take it off the table. And I'm reminding myself through the act of recognizing that I have permission to honor my boundaries, I'm deserving of my boundaries, and I have permission to take care of my well-being.
Yeah, wow, such an important point as far as like communicating your boundaries, I think has been something that I think a lot of people have seen via social media and all of these different things of like, there's been a lot of talk about that, but doing it is harder than, just saying it. So I think that people really have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, or making others feel, slightly uncomfortable. So thank you. Yeah, for that. And Laura and Arielle, anything to add as far as feelings that maybe you might be feeling going in, or things that you think other people should keep in mind as we return to something normal, something?
Yeah, I feel like for me, I'm clearer on my desires and I'm clearer on the visions of my life than ever before, and giving myself permission to, go for them without overthinking what other people think about them. I think a lot of times we talk about our needs, and I view my desires as just as important as my needs. I view them as the same thing. I'm like, I want to affirm my worthiness to live the most delicious life possible. And so like, I'm just approaching my life and my career, which are so conflated often, in a way that I actually enjoy, through a place of like, through a lens of like, what is the absolute best case scenario? Like, what is the highest vision? And I'm holding that for myself and just trusting it, because there's a lot of, we're just living in a time where there's a lot of very heavy, like dualistic thinking, like this is good or this is bad, right? If you want to wear a mask or not want to wear a mask, there's people who have strong opinions about all of that. If you want to travel versus not travel, there's people who have a lot of opinions about all of that. If you want to go to brunch with your friends and no one, like, it's just everyone has strong opinions, but I trust myself as a sovereign being who knows what's best for me. And I trust that I am like protected and guided in my decision making. And so just like, I guess I'm affirming like our individual freedom and sovereignty to choose what's best for us. And that's where I'm at. That's what I've been thinking about, right? So like, for example, I'm a Sagittarius. I love to travel. I love to be free. Like, don't bind me, don't restrict me, right? And so last year, like for many of us, was really challenging for me in that respect. And I didn't travel. Like from when I moved back in March through March of 2020, I didn't travel. I had like a birthday thing planned in November, didn't end up doing that, right? But at the top of April, I just started to feel like this stirring within me. I was like, I'm really meant to go somewhere. Like I'm really meant to get out. And in part, it was also influenced by something that has been lighting me up for almost a year now, which is human design. My environment is mountains. Like I literally felt like mountain energy calling me. And I ultimately said yes. And I went to Sedona in March. And I literally can't tell you all how much that trip fed me and nourished me in ways that my entire community is benefiting from, like me choosing to say yes to what my spirit was calling me to do and where it was calling me to go. And last month, I literally went to another mountain environment. I went to Mount Shasta. And so, again, just affirming that like our desires are also signs of our needs, like our literal needs, and to honor them in ways that might feel radical to you or to other people, and that other people might have very strong opinions on. But when you know, you know. When you know, you know.
Yeah, I love that. And as someone who loves traveling, that was the biggest hurdle for me. And it's finally, I feel like, getting to a point where I am comfortable. But it's also one of our like small, simple steps, is to plan a vacation. Even if you don't think you're going to go on it right away, is to giving you something to look forward to is, a really small and great way to improve your mental health. So awesome. Well, talking about brunch plans or lack thereof, there's been obviously a complete shift in how our friendships and our relationships have come through this time. We've been isolated. We haven't necessarily been able to see our friends or see people that we normally see day to day, whether it's our barista or, that kind of thing. So whether it's been like this really exciting time that you're like, wow, I get to see everyone again, or kind of this anxious moment of, oh no, there's so many plans coming through on text messages and group chats and all of these things. I'd love to hear kind of from each of you how you think friendships and relationships have changed in any way, better, worse. And then also, I think what maybe we should expect as we look to reconnect with these past relationships or current relationships, really.
Yeah.
I think this is a great time to engage in the act of grace and compassion, and recognizing that this last year and a half has been difficult and we all experience difficulty very differently, and it sometimes impacts how we show up in our relationships and generally how we treat others. Everything we do toward other people are a reflection of our inner world. And so I think this is first a great time for us to try to be compassionate toward the people that we've been in relationship with, especially if we've seen an adjustment to that relationship that has gone in a direction that we may not like or we are struggling with. because we all are dealing with something. And I think it's important that we see it through the lens of recognizing we're calling it a pandemic, but what we really went through was a form of global trauma. And the way trauma manifests for everybody is a unique experience. So I just want to start there as laying the foundation, because everyone has mental health and our mental health can be impacted by different things. I also think when it comes to expectations around reconnecting, as we've been talking about boundaries a lot through this segment, what's also important is recognizing that healthy boundaries is not just about you erecting them, it's also about you respecting other people's boundaries as well. So you might find that your friendships have shifted and people have new boundaries. Oftentimes we implement boundaries in pre-existing relationships. So the things that we may be used to or adapted to in that specific relationship or friendship is starting to change. And remember that we as people have the ability to grow with one another. Relationships are about negotiating, relationships are about compromise, relationships are about respect. And so if we can see it, and I'm talking about healthy relationships, right? And so when we can utilize those aspects of honoring our own boundaries and erecting them while also respecting other people's choices and their boundaries, we can learn how to continue to adapt in these friendships and relationships that we have. But the other thing I want to say is grief is the response to loss, and some people may be just experiencing the loss of an actual relationship or a friendship. And I get this question all the time, like, how can I overcome heartbreak and how can I overcome this loss? And there is no cure, there is no remedy. You just have to allow yourself to grieve what you had. It's okay to honor the memories. It's okay to think about what happened. Give yourself the space to process this loss that has happened over time, and recognizing by processing it means paying attention to your emotional responses, talking about it, being vulnerable about your hurt. You don't have to hide your pain. You don't have to act like a friendship breakup didn't hurt, because we know they hurt, right? And so give yourself permission to feel that loss. Talk about it, do things to help you through this grieving process. But I think when we can engage in all those different practices that I shared, that can also help us with the ways our relationships have maybe expanded, shifted, or even shrunk over time.
Yeah, great points. And I think to your last point of friendships and like breakups, that is such an important point, I feel like, especially for people who haven't really realized that friendships are relationships, and they require as much care and boundaries, like you said, and it will be a different way moving forward if you do end up spacing each other or like separating from each other in certain ways. So thank you for that. Arielle, did you have something to say as well?
Yeah. So my husband and I actually got married in the pandemic, which highly recommend if you're looking to cut some cost. But I more so say that because, we invited the people our parents wanted us to invite. We invited friends who were like, yeah, we're kind of like, we would want them there. We invited family members we've never seen before. We invited all these people, and then we had nothing. And we sent out hey, we're not, having a full wedding. We did end up just having our parents and our families at a beach, and we wanted that. We knew we wanted to start our lives together. And then, this year that we're in right now started to happen. We're like, okay, things are opening, things are happening. And, we're getting, are you guys going to do a full wedding? Are you going to do a full wedding? And we're like, we had a wedding, like we had what we had and it was good. And so we sent out a final note to everyone of like, we're married, we're not doing a ceremony anytime soon, but maybe we'll see you as a couple, and it was more so we did that and set that boundary because we had this thought of like, well, what if we don't want to invite the same people anymore? You know, like, what if we don't want those people we felt obligated to invite there? Because this last year has really pushed us to an intimacy with people that just hits different, right? So either we communicated with a small group of people, we made new friends that we never thought, or we lost. And I kind of had a mix of all of that. And so when we do get ready to have that time where we want to dance and eat with the people who have walked through us in this year, it looks different. That list looks different. And so I think a lot of what Minna was saying, I love that boundaries. That's all I could think about really, is these boundaries. And also this like, I don't know if I'm with you, like that, those two things are kind of like balancing in my head of like, why do we give energy and time and space to people and things that we actually don't have a desire to do, you know? And like Lauren was saying, our desires are reflections of our needs, and they're just as important. Like that same, I think, energy goes into our relationships, that we're being fueled by the people we're connected to, and vice versa. And really being intentional with that. So I think in this last year, relationships for me have shifted so much. And it's been hard, and you've grieved the ones that we've lost, you know, that insecure, like when they went and told us, like, losing friendships, losing best friends hurt, and yet they're seasonal and necessary. And so being really intentional with like, I don't have time, energy, or capacity to not be around things that fuel and fill me, and the same goes with the people. And so really like bringing that energy into this next year, because otherwise I'll just be with friends who exhaust me, you know, or be friends with people that have absolutely no desire to be friends with. And we honestly, truly don't have time for that. So.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, and one that I think a lot of us are feeling in this time. The idea of like obligation versus intention, or things that give us actual joy and energy as opposed to depleting of it. Lauren, did you have something to add?
Yes, I sure do. I love this because, you know, intimacy and relationships is like literally at my core of my purpose, and a foundation for my life. So I think about this all the time. You know, I oftentimes tell people, because it's true, I literally had to go to the other side of the world to really discover what unconditional love is. That was in 2018. I went on a retreat with other Black women and women of color. It was really centered in healing around unconditional love. And from that powerful energy, which is really like the most powerful energy, creating and manifesting the lives that we imagine for ourselves. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is because literally preceding that trip, I had a really interesting dynamic with my best friend. And she said to me a few days prior to going on that trip, because we were having a little tension in our relationship, she said, you know, Lauren, I don't expect anything from you. She was like, I've noticed for a while now that every time we're together, you're always teaching me something or giving me something or trying to do something for me. And I just need you to know that I don't need anything from you. I just want your love. And it was literally an identity crisis moment for me. Like, I don't even use that lightly. Like, I literally was like, well, then what am I here for? You know? And I didn't say that to her. I was just like, awesome, right? Like, intellectually, I was like, great. But like emotionally, I was like, what is going on? And then a few days later, when I'm in Bali, Indonesia on this retreat that I don't even know, God sent me there. I don't even know how I got there. I'm just like still shook. But I'll never forget really having a moment when one of the women who guided the retreat for us, Carlene Graham Perry, she hosted this really beautiful exercise that I encourage everyone to do, which is to consider a moment in your life that you can always look back to remember that you are unconditionally loved, right? For her, it was a moment with a child and her family who just looked at her one day, the sun was rising and was just like in bliss. And she was like, I didn't do anything to bring this child bliss, right? Like, we were just having this moment of love. And for me, you know, I got out my colored pencils because we were supposed to like draw a symbolic representation of that moment. And for me, I was like coming up blank. I literally couldn't think of a single moment in my life, because every moment that I was thinking of, my mind was telling me, well, there was that moment of love because you did this for that person, or that was because of this thing that you gave them. So the reason why I'm mentioning this is because when we think about relationships shifting, and even the very purpose of relationships, for me, I'm so clear now, and I'm so grateful for this clarity and for the inner work that I've done to arrive here, that, you know, a relationship in my life isn't I'm going to do this for you, so you do this for me. Relationships in my life are all about, are we spiritually growing together? Are we contributing to one another's livelihood and vitality and inspiration and purpose? And so if that relationship isn't doing that for me, I'm okay with it not being here anymore. I'm okay with relationships sometimes being a season, a reason, but the ones that are for the lifetime, that's bomb too. You know what I mean? So for us to just like step into this new chapter, understanding that the relationships around us, they're not always to make us feel good, right? They're not always to like make us feel like validated and whatever like our egos want, but it's like, is this nourishing me in a way that I actually need? Sorry about that. Is this actually nourishing me from a place that I actually, from a growth standpoint, right? My friend Danielle Lyles-Barton, she said, every soul that you encounter is there for the sole purpose of your growth. So when a relationship ends, we can actually cultivate gratitude and say, wow, let me reflect on how this connection allowed me to grow. You know, if that happened, you have so much to be thankful for. And it did happen. Like, I guarantee, even if a relationship ended in a way that you wish it hadn't, there is something that came before that that allowed you to learn. Your only job then is to internalize that lesson and apply it for the future relationships. That's it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's something that a lot of people needed to hear or wanted to hear, because I think it's so important. And it's such a, I feel like it's a lifelong learning of like what those relationships look like and how they serve you and in what ways. So thank you for that word. We do have a bit of time for a couple of questions that I do want to get to in the Q&A. And one of them being, do you have any advice for navigating decision fatigue? I'm feeling so burnt out on deciding what is and is not safe and healthy for me. I wonder if any of you have thoughts.
I'll jump in with something a bit unconventional. So I spoke about human design earlier. Just in short, human design is this powerful system that really synthesizes several different existing spiritual systems, and also involves like quantum mechanics and like literally how our bodies are energetically designed. And the reason why I mention this is because when you understand your human design, which you can literally find out right now, but just wait, because stay present for this conversation. You can go to jovianarchive.com. When you find out your type, you automatically then know your strategy. And the strategy that you're given according to your type is how to make decisions that are correct for you. So nowhere in human design is this is bad, this is right, this is good, this is evil. It's really about what's correct for you. So I'm just going to give one brief example, and then I know that these amazing women have additional thoughts to provide. I'm a manifesting generator, right? I can't even get into all of it, but what I will tell you is that for me, that means in part, I'm really meant to be doing a bunch of different projects. It's correct for me to have my podcast and a membership space and to be building this physical healing space here in Minneapolis, right? But doesn't mean I'm meant to say yes to every time someone reaches out to ask me to be on a podcast or to collaborate with them or to, no. How do I decide? I have a sacral authority, literally in my body. My sacral it's that gut feeling. Like, you know, when someone asks you a yes or no question and you feel in your gut, like this expansive, like yes or this no, it bypasses the mind. The mind has literally no role in it. So for me, this means that I'm meant to trust the intelligence of my body, which, let me tell you, as a Black woman, that's a radical thing to do, to trust what my body tells me when we've been so conditioned to not trust our bodies, to be so disconnected from our bodies. So the reason why I mention this is because when I tell y'all, I have saved time, I have saved energy, I have saved emotional labor by literally reprogramming myself according to my human design. And it has been the biggest like sigh of relief, because another thing about it is that for me as a sacral authority, and there's all different kinds of authorities, but for me as a sacral authority, the response that I get isn't about if it's good or bad for me, right? Oprah could hit me up tomorrow and be like, Lauren, do you want to do this thing? I still have to listen to my sacral authority, because it's also about, do I have the energy for it? And a lot of what we've been talking about in this conversation is actually about energy. It's about acknowledging that 2020 was a year where we were invited to really deepen into and trust ourselves as energetic beings, not just as mental beings, not just can I perform, can I be productive, can I get you what you need? Let me honor myself from a holistic standpoint. I see lots of questions about human design.
Just an FYI, we do have an explainer on human design on the site. We will send that with the email as well. So as a generator, I get it, but yes.
Ooh, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that. Thank you.
Minna or Arielle, do you have thoughts about decision fatigue as well, or how someone can navigate this time in a way that makes sense for them?
I think Lauren embodied all of that. She said it all. I think self-trust is so vital in decision making. Reminding ourselves that we're highly capable of honoring our needs. It's about reminding yourself that you are safe in your body and that you are safe with your ability to make choices that are for the betterment of your well-being. And I would also add to that, that many things in life can be safe and many things in life can be healthy. And so making sure that we're not putting certain experiences in very rigid categories of black and white. And if I don't do this, I'm gonna completely fail because there's this only one way to practice safety, or there's only one way to practice a healthy lifestyle. So I would also add that, because I think sometimes when we are consistently trying to do the work of healing and owning who we are and making right choice or healthy choices, I would say, sometimes it can put us in this box of feeling like there's only one way of being. And so I just encourage you to recognize that as well, that there are many things that you can do that will put you in a place of safety and healthiness. And so try not to be rigid around your decision making, but also recognizing you can trust yourself. And I do just want to unpack too, like trusting your gut leads with a sense of peace and harmony, where anxiety is rooted in fear and worry. And I find that sometimes people are like, well, how do I know the difference between the two? Remember that one generally tries to keep you stuck in a state of fear, and the other one naturally comes with a sense of peace. And because you are deserving of peace, you have permission to lean into it.
Yes, powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, nothing more needs to be said, I think. That was really fantastic. And then we have one last question, and I'm cognizant of time, so I don't want to go too far, but I do have one last question, which is, how do you forgive friends and move on during a time like now, when we need to have compassion with how our loved ones deal with their own decisions, specifically towards COVID, but that could be, I think, broadened towards anything?
I think when it comes to forgiveness, because forgiveness is a choice, it can be really important to identify what that looks like, depending on whatever the rupture is in the relationship. Remembering that forgiveness does not necessarily mean re-entry into our lives. When we choose to forgive someone, that means we are releasing an emotional attachment to the harm that was caused and to the person as well. So it's really important for us to just assess, if I choose to forgive you, how will I now navigate life with you? The other piece to it, however, in regards to people and their choices around COVID, that's the key word, people and their choices. People are allowed to make decisions for whatever they feel is right for them. We don't get to define that. But when their decisions start to impact our life, that's when you can assess, this is where I may need to erect the boundary. However, a boundary is not control. So we just want to make sure that if we are finding friends or even family members who are making decisions related to COVID, related to normalcy, that doesn't necessarily impact us or our well-being, we have to get comfortable with allowing people to choose what is right for them, even if we think it's wrong. So I'm unpacking that in two different ways, but I think those are two things to just assess, like with forgiveness, what does moving forward look like for you? But also, what does it look like to comfortably allow people to make decisions for them, even if it makes you uncomfortable?
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's such an important point. I feel like boundaries has often been conflated with different expectations of others. And really it's about, yeah, like respecting other people's boundaries just as you respect your own. Arielle, did you have something to add as well?
Yeah, I think that forgiveness, like Minna said, oftentimes I notice in my own experiences, I had to do the work of forgiving, and not always hearing it from another party, right? Can I still be at peace? Can I still have sanity within myself if I don't ever hear that I'm sorry from other people? Can I still do the work of forgiving? Can I still do the work of mending, but not necessarily, I love that, not necessarily re-entering, because at the end of the day, the forgiveness aspect or not forgiveness aspect, we carry that, and I had a friend who I did lose, and it was a very close friend, and that it wrecked me, I was not sleeping. Like, it was like, this was my person. And I had another friend who was like, why are you giving her so much energy? And I had to sit with that question of I am giving her a lot right now, and she's probably not giving 2 times of a response to what I'm doing, because she's worrying about herself, but I'm worrying about her, and so, which leaves less room for me to focus on where I'm at and why my peace is not intact, so that forgiveness factor, it has more to do with us than it does the other person, because if we never hear I'm sorry, if we never hear them trying to mend something, can we do that work within ourselves of mending and healing, so that we walk away peaceful, so that we can approach the conversation or the person without animosity in our hearts, because that where it wears and tears on us as human beings, and being able to release it and relinquish it, I think, will allow us to walk a little lighter, and also to see people with a love and intention in the same way that we would see that for ourselves. So being able to have that space of at the end of the day, it's I need to be at peace and well within my own self. And so what needs to happen in order to do that?
Yeah, I think that's lovely, and really about protecting your peace specifically during this time is so, so important, and your well-being, which is why we're all here. So, well, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining me today. This was so lovely, and really, I hope, helpful to all of those who attended. To wrap up, I'd love to just give a shout or each of you give a shout to where people can follow you or support you in any way. So Minna, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, well, you all can visit my website at www.minab.com, and I actually have a free self-care packet on my website for you to download and actually put some things to practice for your own life. And you can also follow me on Instagram at Minna_B.
Amazing. Thank you. Lauren, what about you?
Yeah, you all can follow me at Hello Lauren Ash. I'm mostly on Instagram. I don't even remember the last time I went on Twitter or Facebook. And also Black Girl in Ohm on all social platforms. I also just want to acknowledge something exciting that I talked about with Samantha and the Well+Good team, that in our email follow-up for this event, we're actually going to be giving a link for those of you who are attending or maybe watching the replay who are women of color and Black women who want to deepen in a community more. We have a beautiful membership community called The Circle, and we're going to be giving like an exclusive link to enroll with us if this feels resonant for you. So I just want to shout that out, because The Circle has been, honestly, for me, deeply transformational and aligning with like-minded people who are on journeys of spiritual growth and stepping into our wholeness. And then also I would just say, listen to the Black Girl in Ohm podcast. We have such powerful conversations. I hope to get both of these women, Arielle and Minna, on the show for season 6. So yeah, thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Arielle, what about you?
I'm everything Arielle Lastoria, like you can see on my name tag. That's my website. I have poetry on Spotify and iTunes if you'd like to listen to that as part of your meditations or just like morning rituals. Feel free to do that. I am on Twitter, SoundCloud, if you're underground like that. My website is just myname.com, and there you can find some merch that I have that reminds you of your magic, either a mug or a t-shirt, rock either one, and then my books of poetry as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you again so much. This was wonderful to be in conversation with you all, and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.